Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live today. Thank you all for joining us. I see people from all over the world here in the audience. If you haven't yet, please do let us know where you're tuning in from, what the weather is like over there. Is it cold and blustery? Or maybe you're somewhere where it's summer right now and you're on summer vacation with great weather. So we'd love to hear. Let us know. I'm all bundled up over here. I've got my MyHeritage sweatshirt, and we're ready to go for another fantastic Facebook Live today. We have a great session lined up for you. As always, one of our first Facebook Lives of the year of 2022. So we're so excited for all the amazing content that we have for you this year. So many great things in store. We just can't wait to introduce them all to you. So I see so many comments here saying where you're all from. I see Connie from Michigan. She says that it's freezing. I see Fred from the Netherlands. Lipov in Hamilton in a snow blizzard. I see Pat from Dallas, Texas, who says it's warm and the sun is shining. So I'm glad to hear the sun is shining somewhere in some places, and that you're still joining us even though the sun is shining over there. That's so great to hear. So thank you everyone for tuning in and for taking a part in our Facebook Live today. We have a fantastic session for you. We have with us Melissa Barker, and she'll be talking about being the home archivist. Before we get into the session, I just want to let you know about a giveaway that we have for today. We'll be giving away a MyHeritage Complete Plan to one lucky winner. And all that you have to do to enter, since we're starting off the new year and a new year full of great online content that we're bringing to you, what we'd like to see in the comment section is ideas for topics that you would like to learn more about this coming year. So if there's a session that you'd like to see in a Facebook Live or an article on the MyHeritage blog, let us know what interests you, what you think that you could learn more about, what topics you'd like to delve into this coming year. We'd love to hear. Please let us know. And we will pick one lucky winner for the prize at the end of today's session. So if you don't know, the MyHeritage Complete Plan is the best plan we have to offer at MyHeritage. It includes unlimited access to over 16 billion historical records, in addition to unlimited family tree size on MyHeritage, advanced DNA features, and just so much more, access to all of our photo tools. It's just the best plan, and we are so thrilled to be able to give it away to one lucky winner. So let us know what you'd like to learn more about over 2022, what sessions you'd like to see, and we hope to hear from you. As always, please leave us comments or questions for our speaker throughout today's session in the comments, and we hope to get to a lot of the questions by the end of today's show. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker. For those of you who maybe didn't join our Facebook Lives over 2021, we often had Melissa Barker. She is a fantastic speaker, and it's always a pleasure having her on our show. She's a certified archives manager and public historian working at the Houston County, Tennessee Archives. She's affectionately known as the archive lady to the genealogy community. She lectures, teaches, and writes about the genealogy research process, researching in archives, and records preservation. And today she'll talk about being the home archivist. So let me bring her onto the screen here to say hello to all of you. See if we can get her up here. Hello, Melissa.
Hello, Esther. How are you?
I'm great. How are you today?
Oh, we're doing good. We're here in Middle Tennessee. We've got some snow on the ground, but I think it's going to melt off in the next couple of days. But doing great, doing great. Looking forward to 2022. So I'm going to get started and share my screen.
Fantastic.
And I know that one of the things that cannot find my presentation.
Okay, no problem. We'll get that up and working.
There it is. I found it. One of the things that I know that a lot of people do at the beginning of a year, something I actually don't do, is they have New Year's resolutions. And one of those New Year's resolutions, a lot of times, is getting my stuff organized. And so I'm not putting any pressure on you, but what I am going to do is I'm going to show you some things that you can do at home. Because one of the things that genealogists may or may not realize is that they are a home archivist. I have been a genealogist for almost 33 years, and I've been an archivist for 10 years. And one of the things that I have found that is so true is that I am at home, I'm an archivist, and at work, I'm an archivist because I am dealing with some of the same things that archivists deal with. So we're going to talk about that, and hopefully, what I share with you today will get you inspired to want to take care of your materials, your genealogical records, your ephemera, your artifacts, and not feel so overwhelmed. So let's talk about what we can do to take care of our things so that we can pass them down to the next generation. Now, I'm going to use a lot of visuals in my presentations, and the first two on this first slide. The one on the left is actually a photo that was taken at the Archives Institute at the Tennessee State Library and Archives in Nashville when I was attending the Archives Institute there. The hands in the very, very back with the gloved hands are mine. I was working on the Tennessee Supreme Court records. We got to clean them, got to organize them, and learn about them. And then the photograph there on the right is actually an example of a manuscript collection that we had donated to our archives at Houston County, Tennessee. I actually saw someone in the audience who's from Centerville. I don't live very far from Centerville, so hello to you. And so as you can see in a manuscript collection, it looks a lot like what maybe you have. There's a ledger book, there's a scrapbook, newspaper clippings, photographs, all kinds of things. So let's get started. Genealogists are home archivists. You may not be trained as an archivist like I am, but you take care of the same types of materials that archivists do. And so it's important for us to understand that and to take care of these items, because wouldn't it have been great if our ancestors had taken care of their genealogical materials, documents, photographs, maybe the quilt, the family Bible, things like that, and then handed them down because they were in good condition and they lasted. Unfortunately, in my family, I didn't get a lot of those things because they just weren't saved. So, in what ways are genealogists and genealogists and archivists alike? Well, we collect old records, don't we? Genealogists collect old records, whether that's from your cousins, from your family members that have passed on. We collect records that we find on the internet. As archivists, we have people that bring us records almost on a daily basis. Now, as far as I'm a county archivist, and what I do is I preserve, manage, and organize the county records. But I also have chosen to accept records donations of historical and genealogical records because there's no other place in my county that is doing this, and I want to preserve and save our local history. So collecting old records is one way we have something in common. We also preserve records, photographs, and artifacts for future generations to enjoy. As genealogists, we're trying to do that. We're trying to collect information on our ancestors, on our family members, put it in a family tree. Maybe we've got old letters or scrapbooks, diaries that we are getting that information from. But we want to preserve those items because I don't know about you, but there is nothing like holding an original document, an original diary that your ancestor actually wrote on. And so we want to preserve those things for future generations. And I know I get a lot of people that say, but my children and my grandchildren are just not interested in this stuff. Well, you know what? That's okay, because there are tons of archives out there, and I'm sure you could find one out there that you can donate your materials to, a local archive where your ancestors are from, so that those records can benefit other researchers in the future. One thing that we also do as genealogists that archivists like to do is we share the information that are contained in our records. As an archivist, I absolutely love it when genealogists come into my archives and are seeking records and information about their ancestors. I know that as a genealogist, I am always ready to share with those that are researching the same people, the same families that I am. I've been known to send what I have, photographs, documents, things that I've collected, to other genealogists. I feel it's important that the more we share this information, the more it's going to survive. People say that it only takes 1 or 2 generations for the family history to absolutely disappear because it's not shared, it's not told. And so, one of the things that I like to do is to share my information with others because hopefully then it will be handed down in their family as well. And genealogists and archivists alike, we love the stories that our records tell. I can tell you that working in an archives, I'll run across a record, a photograph, something in my archive that makes me stop and want to do research and find the rest of the story. And so, as a genealogist, I do the exact same thing. And so, this is another way that genealogists and archivists have a lot of things in common. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about these particular subjects. We're going to talk about a dedicated working space, which you're going to see is kind of important. We're going to talk about original order, which is one of the first foundational rules of archiving records. We're going to talk about a home archivist toolkit, and it is an actual toolkit. And so I'm going to tell you about some things to put in your toolkit. We're going to talk about using binders, folders, or boxes. And then we're going to move on to unfolding and flattening records. I'm going to give you a little tutorial about how to do that. And also cleaning records. We're going to talk about whether or not we should clean our records, how to clean our records, removing hazards. This is probably one of the most important things that we do in an archives, and also we should do as home archivists, is removing hazards from our records. And then we're going to follow up the ending with record storage and climate controls and consulting with a conservator, because you know what, even archivists don't do it all. Even we have to reach out to a conservator from now and again to get some advice. So first, we're going to talk about a dedicated working space. Now, we don't all live in archives. I get the privilege of working in one every day, but we don't live in an archive. However, we do need to follow some of the practices that archivists practice. And one of those is that we have a dedicated workspace. I would suggest you find a place in your home, whether that is at an office, maybe you have a home office, or if you're like some people, I understand, maybe you use the kitchen table, the dining room table, maybe you use the guest room bed, whatever space you're using for your workspace. And when I say workspace, I mean where you do your genealogy research, where you work on your genealogical records. Use that space consistently. Try to tell your family members, hey, this is kind of my genealogy space, and try to use that. Like I said, I know we all can't live and work in an archive, but we can try to maybe find us a little space. The reason we want a dedicated working space is because we want to have our things in a safe place so that when we come back to it, every time we come back to it, it's there for us. And it's going to be a place where you're going to put your home archivist toolkit. And I'm going to tell you all the things you need to put in your toolkit. And you need to have that at the ready, because if you have the right tools, then you can do and get the job done. One of the things I encourage genealogists to do when they're working on their records is to work on one collection of records at a time. It's kind of like doing genealogy research. I always encourage genealogists work on one ancestor at a time, because you can get so overwhelmed. And when you get overwhelmed, you just don't want to do anything. You get frustrated and you want to walk away. So work on one collection of records at a time. I get asked all of the time, I am so overwhelmed. I've got boxes and boxes of photographs, or boxes and boxes of records and documents, and so much. How do I start? What do I do? Well, I always tell people, you take it one bite at a time. Take 10 photographs out of that box and then close the box up and only work with those 10 photographs. Once you're done with doing what you need to with those photographs, then you go back to the box and get 10 more. You just take it one bite at a time. Also, this is also, believe it or not, kind of important. You'll be amazed at how much this helps you. At the end of the workday, or if you're only working for an hour or so, whatever that time span is, and you're done, clean up your space before you go do something else. Now, I encourage my volunteers, and I also practice this at the archives where I work. We clean up our space at the end of the day. Now, this serves two purposes. When you're cleaning up your space, you may find that you did not put a document away where it needed to, or a photograph away, or you didn't put all of your tools back in your toolkit. Also, what it really helps with is that when you come back, when you're ready to come back and to do more work, and in an archive setting, it's usually the next work day, you've come back to a clean workspace, one that you're ready to go. It's kind of hard to come back to a workspace and it's dirty, cluttered, or just not ready for you, and you have to take the time to clean up that space first. It doesn't give you much of an incentive to want to work at that space. So try to clean up your space at the end of the day as best as you can. That way, the next time you come, then you're ready to go. Original order. This is a rule, I guess you could say, that we use in archives. Original order is something that we impose on records. For instance, if we get a collection of records that's donated to us, we try to see if there was any kind of an original order placed on it by the person who put those records collections together. Now, there are times when we look at a collection and we think, well, all this stuff was just thrown in a box. There's no original order here. But for instance, let's take a scrapbook. A scrapbook, someone has sat down and has put these things in their scrapbook in a particular order, whether it's chronological, whether it's by family member, however they put it in there, they really thought about it and they decided to put it in there that particular way. So the Society of American Archivists Glossary of Terms defines original order this way, actually in a couple of sections. Original order is a fundamental principle of archives. Maintaining records in original order serves two purposes. First, it preserves existing relationships and evidential significance that can be inferred from the context of the records. That's first. Second, it exploits the record's creators' mechanisms to access the records, saving the archives the work of creating new access tools. So in essence, original order means if you have been given a box of records, a file cabinet full of records, or a scrapbook, or a 3-ring binder full of records, look at it. See if the person who put this together put them in some kind of order. Like I said, they may be in alphabetical order. It could be in numerical order, date order. And a lot of times we need to pay attention to that. Because let's say you've been given 100 old family letters written by one of your ancestors who was in the Civil War. Well, the way to understand the context, the information in those letters a lot of times is to put them in chronological order so they can be read in that order. Because it may be that the person mentions something in one letter and then 2 weeks later in another letter, they carry on the conversation. So if you have them in a correct order, you can follow the conversation and follow the information they've provided in the letters. Our ancestors may have had a reason for how they put together their photo albums, their scrapbooks, their genealogy research binders. Maybe they did genealogy research. And so it's important for us to pay attention to that. If you figure out that there really is no order, then you can just go on and not have to pay attention to it. But if there is a particular order, maybe there's a reason why they're in that order. And that's something that we try to investigate and look into. Again, boxes of records may have been packed a certain way for a reason, and they may not have. I have received boxes of records from certain county offices where it looks like they just cleaned off the top of their desk and threw it into a box. There's no original order there, and so we treat it as such. But it's important for us to at least look at it and see if we can figure out if there is an order. Keeping that original order with these records collections can actually maybe help you to tell your ancestors' story. Just like those old letters I talked about. Maybe there are running stories in those letters that start at one area in one letter and it continues on in letters that come after that. And if you have them in the correct order, then you can follow the story or follow the conversation. So that's why it's important that we do that. Next is organizational methods. Now, this is only a very short presentation when you're talking about organizational methods. There are probably a gazillion organizational methods out there. I'm only going to share 2 with you today. They may be 2 that you have used or that you're using now, and they may be 2 that you've never used. You have your own organizational method, and that is perfectly fine. What I tell people is you find a method that works for you and just use that method consistently. Because what works for you may not work for me, and what works for me may not work for you. It's not that the method is a correct way of doing things. What an organizational method does is it helps you as the genealogist to find the method that works for you, because that way you know how to find your records. You know how they're organized, and that's the most important part. Whatever method you choose to use, whether you're using a method now or you start fresh and use a different method, just be consistent. You really don't want to have 3 or 4 different kinds of methods in amongst your genealogical records, because then you're going to get confused. Well, how did I organize these? Well, that's different from how I organize these other records. Choose a method that works for you and just be consistent throughout. Another thing from an archivist standpoint is I would encourage you to use archival materials as much as possible. Acid-free folders, archival tissue paper, photo sleeves, things like that. Now, I understand when you go looking for these materials on these online archival stores, yeah, it's expensive. I do not know why when they take out things like acid that they have to raise the price 2 or 3 times more than just a regular file folder. And so be prepared for that. Now, one thing I do encourage people to do, if you just can't afford the higher prices, then just use a regular file folder or just use a regular photo sleeve. And the reason I say that is because at least you're protecting your documents. Yes, eventually the acid in those materials are going to probably damage your records, but it's going to be a long while before that happens. We need to get those materials into archival materials so that they're protected. So one of the first organizational methods I want to talk about is the binder method. I call it the binder method. This is the organizational binder method that I used when I first became a genealogist, and I used it for several years. It really was working for me. And so this is where you have 3-ring binders and you have document sleeves, and you store your documents in these binders like you see in this photograph. Maybe you have a binder for each surname. Maybe you have a binder for each ancestor. I've seen it done different ways. And so binder method is a perfectly good method for organizing your genealogical records. A lot of these binders are usually labeled by surname. That's how I did mine. I put a surname on a binder and put all of the records for that surname in that binder. And within the binder, you may have divided up your documents by document type, or maybe you've arranged them chronologically. Maybe you've arranged them by ancestor. Maybe you've put some tabs in there, and behind each tab is a different ancestor or a different document type, such as all of your birth records behind one, all of your death records behind another. That's how I did mine. I did mine by surname. And then within that binder, I put all of the birth records behind one tab, all of the death records behind another tab, things like that. This is absolutely, to me, a great organizational method to use for beginners to use, especially. When you're a beginner and you're finding all of these records, or you have been given a ton of records to have to organize, the binder method is a great way to get them organized and get them organized fairly quickly. And so you may find this method a great one if you're just beginning. And you may find this method is what works for you. And if that's the case, then by all means, use this method. And that way you'll stay organized. You'll know exactly where those records are located. One thing I would advise you to do as an archivist is that if you are using binders, to lay those binders flat on the shelf, not up on the end. And the reason I say that is because many times if the binders are not completely full, where all of those documents that are in those document sleeves are standing straight up and down, they could sag. And if they're sagging those sleeves, that means that the documents inside of those sleeves are sagging and they can become damaged. One thing to keep in mind about documents and photographs is they are naturally deteriorating every single day. That's just their natural element. But if we can keep from breaking the fibers in the documents, bending them, folding them, then we can keep the deterioration from going along too fast. And so always store your binders flat on the shelf. The next method I want to talk to you about is the folder method. Now, several years ago, I would probably say 10 years ago, I decided to switch methods. the binder method, for as I had gotten to be a more experienced genealogist, once I became an archivist, I found that my binder method was just not working for me. And so I was not afraid. I thought, I'm going to find another method. And so I decided to use the folder method. Now, this is how I use the folder method. You may find other ways to do this folder method, just like the binder method. Again, just choose an organizational method and just be consistent. So what I do is I have a folder for each and every ancestor that I have researched, that is part of my family and that I've researched. And what I do in that folder, which helps me because I'm a visual learner, is I put all of their documents in that folder in chronological order. From top to bottom. On the top is their birth records, on the bottom is their death records. And in between are all of the records I've collected for them, all the information I've collected for them, in chronological order. And then I file that file in a filing cabinet behind a tab for that particular surname. Now, many people that I've told this method to can't imagine how many file folders they may have because they have so many ancestors. Well, that's true. And that may be one reason why you may not like this method. But I like this method for this reason. When I was using the binder method, if I needed to find information on one ancestor, I had to flip through almost the entire binder because I had to go to the birth records, find their birth record. I had to go to the death record section, get their death record. And so I decided that this folder method actually worked better for me because I work on one ancestor at a time. And so when I'm working on a particular ancestor, I can pull their file. And when I pull their file, I have all of their records in chronological order in that file. And I don't have to flip through all the other family members' records. I have them all right there in that one file. I arrange my file folders in filing cabinets by surname. I have room in my home office for filing cabinets, and so that works for me. You can also put these file folders in boxes if you don't want to use filing cabinets. That's perfectly fine as well. Archives use the folder method when organizing their vertical files collection. If you've ever done research in archives and seen their vertical files, they are arranged by file folder in filing cabinets. Vertical files are a collection of hodgepodge of records, and they are organized and labeled by surname or subject name. And so this is a great method to use in an archive setting, but I feel like it's a great method to use for genealogists. Now, you will need to have room for filing cabinets because they will fill up. Or if you decide to put your files in boxes, you'll need to have room for those boxes. Some people may not have room for something like this, and so the binder method may be a lot more desirable for wherever you live, and that's perfectly understandable. Again, remember what I said. You find an organizational method that works for you and use that one. Like I said, just because it works for me, it may not work for you. Home Archivist toolbox. This particular type of toolbox is one that I want you to actually put together. It's a physical toolbox. It's not electronic. It's not on your computer. This is a toolbox. And in my archives, when I have volunteers that come, I provide them with a toolbox and I tell them, okay, these are the materials that we use in working with records in the archives. And so I decided, why not provide genealogists with the same toolbox and they can put this together for themselves. So the very first thing I want you to get is an actual toolbox. Now you don't need to get one of those great big huge toolboxes that maybe has rollers and wheels on them. You just need to get you a nice little small handheld toolbox because you're not going to put a ton of materials in there, but you do need something to keep your archivist tools in so they're at the ready at your dedicated space whenever you need them. First thing we're going to put in our archivist toolbox is soft number 2 pencils. I am asked all the time, what do I use to label my documents and photographs with? Well, first of all, documents fine. Photographs, I would encourage you not to write on them very much. But if you feel the need to, use a soft number 2 pencil. These are not damaging. These will not come through to the front of the document or the photograph. And so just get you a few number 2 pencils and put them in your toolbox. Now, there are going to be some photographs that will not allow pencil writing on them. There was a particular time when the photographers were using some sort of a slick type of coating or paper for photographs that pencil will just not write on it. And especially on Polaroid photographs, you can't get pencil to show up on that either. So I encourage you to use an IdentiPen. Um, these can be purchased online anywhere or at archival stores. These is an archival pen. Another one is called a Pigma Micron. I did not include it on this slide. That's another archival pen you can use. They look a lot like a Sharpie pen, but it is not a Sharpie pen. Please do not use Sharpies. They are not good for photographs or documents. But this particular pen has a fatter end and a very small end. I like the small pointed end because it does not make big letters. It makes it very small. So use this sparingly. Use it on the backs of photographs, but if you can, please don't write on photographs. And documents. Use the number 2 pencil on documents. I've never really found a document that you could not get pencil to show up on. But there is going to be an occasion where you cannot get pencil to show up. And so getting this pen, having it in your toolkit will not hurt a thing. And they're fairly inexpensive to get. Next, soft bristle brushes. You want to put soft bristle brushes in your toolbox because we may have scrapbooks or diaries or some other ledger books that we may have that have got dust or soot or things inside of them. And using soft brushes to get that out is what you need to use. That dirt and soot can be very abrasive to documents. And so we want to use soft bristle brushes for that job. Now, you don't have to go out and buy expensive brushes. You can go down to that store that everything's $1 and just get those big, soft makeup brushes. They're very inexpensive, and just put those in your toolkit so that when you need to brush off some dirt or soot or something on your documents, you have them there in your toolkit ready to go. A micro spatula. Now, this is an archivist tool. This is a kind of a jack of all trades tool. We use this in the archives for everything. And so it's called a micro spatula. When you go looking for it in stores, the archival stores or any other stores, it's called a micro spatula. And as you can see, there's different kinds. They're used in the archives for everything. We use them to take off staples. We use them for delicate work. And it's always a great idea to have these in your toolkit. Now, one thing that I've been taught when I've been to some archives classes is you can actually, if you're going to the dentist, talk to your dentist about any old tools that he doesn't use anymore, and maybe he'll let you buy a couple of them for $1 or $2 because these look kind of like dentist tools, don't they? But you can buy these. They're in stores. They are used for everything, and I'm going to show you a couple examples here in a minute. Gloves. Gloves is the next thing I want you to put in your toolkit. Now, in archives world, we've gone back and forth about gloves, kind of like the egg controversy. One year eggs are good for you, the next year they're not good for you. Well, gloves has kind of been that way. I think finally we have settled on a decision in the archives world. But as you can see, I've got white cotton gloves there on the left, and then there are nitrile powder-free gloves and also latex gloves there on the right. So now we have decided that we need to wear gloves only when we're handling photographs. The dirt and oils on our hands will damage photographs, so we need to wear gloves when handling photographs. But we don't really need to be wearing gloves on anything else. And one of the main reasons why we've come to that conclusion is because when you're wearing gloves and you're handling documents or anything else, especially if they're delicate, if they're damaged, you have lost your textile sensation in the end of your fingertips by putting on gloves. So you really can't feel how you're holding the documents. And so it's important that we don't wear gloves so that we can feel the documents, so that we know how we're handling them so they don't get damaged any further. But definitely wear those gloves when you're handling photographs. And so get you a pair of gloves, whether you want the what I call old-fashioned white cotton gloves or the nitrile gloves. Now, the reason we get the powder-free is because the powder inside of the gloves, which is great for your hands, it's not archival. And so you don't want that powder getting on your documents or photographs. And of course, if you're allergic to latex, they have latex-free gloves. But just get a couple of pair, put them in your toolkit in case you need them for your photographs. Here's the next thing, the soot and dirt cleaning sponge, and that's exactly what it's called when you go looking for it, soot and dirt cleaning sponge. This sponge is, you do not use water with it, you don't use any chemicals with it, you use it just as it is. Now you're going to get it in, it's going to come in what's called a brick or a block. It's going to be fairly large. And what you're going to do is you're going to cut it down into 2x2 squares, so something that you can handle in your hand. And this is what you're going to use to clean documents and photographs. Now, you're not going to scrub. Like I said, you're not going to use any water. You're not going to use any cleaning chemicals, just this sponge. And so you can see in the photograph there on the right, there's a clean sponge there on the left, but on the right is a dirty sponge. That was used on one document, and that is the dirt that got picked up. You'll be very surprised when you use these sponges on documents that you can't even really see the dirt, but you'll be surprised how much dirt it will lift off of documents. Document repair tape. This is something else that I would encourage you to put in your toolkit, but I would also encourage you to use it sparingly. I say that there is no such thing as archival tape. But this document repair tape can be used for small tears, small rips, damage in documents. I would just encourage you to get one, have it in your toolkit in case you need it. So that was what your toolkit, and we're going to go over a couple more things using some of those tools here in just a minute, and you'll see some examples. So let's talk about unfolding and flattening records. I'm asked all the time, should I unfold this? Should I flatten this document? Especially when it comes to like old letters that are folded up and put in their original envelopes. I'm asked, should I take this out or should I leave it in the envelope? And so in the archives world, we want everything as flat as possible. The reason being is, like I talked about a minute ago, is that our documents are already naturally deteriorating just by it getting older and older. Well, when you fold and unfold documents over and over for years and years, those folds create damage. And over time, as you unfold and fold, those creases weaken to the point that they will literally fall apart. And so that's why we want to flatten our records. So one of the first steps that an archives does when they're wanting to unfold and flatten records is they take um, the letter out of the envelope, but keep the envelope because that has important information on it as well. So that's one of the first things when we process our records collection is that we will flatten and unfold the records in the collection. You as a home archivist should also be careful to unfold and flatten your family records. If you have old letters, yes, they need to be taken out of the envelope, unfolded, and flattened. If you have documents such as a deed or some court records, something that has been tri-folded or just folded in half, we need to unfold those and flatten them. We need to make sure because we don't want to keep doing that process to make those creases fail. Again, those crease lines in those folded documents will eventually fail if you continue to unfold them and fold them. I've seen it many times, and I'm going to show you a perfect example of that here in just a second. So archiving documents that are flattened will likely to sustain damage in the long run. They will not become more damaged. The folded records, when you bring them out and you want to show them to your family members or just work with them, again, the unfolding and folding will cause damage, and eventually those documents will fall apart, and you just don't want that to happen. So let's talk a minute about cleaning records. Many of us have records that are dirty. I know in our archives, our courthouse had coal stoves, and thankfully, not all of our records were stored near those coal stoves because the soot got on some of our records, and so we had to spend some time cleaning records. You may have records that are dirty, that have got soot on them or dirt on them, or had been exposed to moisture and things like that, and so we need to clean the records if we feel like we can. Again, some records come to the archives dirty. And so maybe you have dirty records as well. This is kind of one of my favorite photographs to show when I talk about cleaning records and how archives get records. We had a county historian. She passed actually in 2014. And she was one of those people that you could tell her a surname. And 3 hours later, she's still telling you about that family. She had so much knowledge. But when she passed, a few weeks later, I get a phone call from her son asking me if we would like to have her records, her research records, because she also did a lot of research on our local community, the history of our local community. Asked me if I'd like to have her records that were stored in her attic. And of course, we were ecstatic. We said, yes, we would love to have them. And so this is just a photograph of part of what he brought to us. I did not realize that it would take a couple of truckloads to get all of her records to us. But this is what I like to call fresh from the attic. As you can see, they're still stored. They're still in their original boxes. We saw dead bugs. We saw some rodents, dead rodents. Found lots of things in these boxes that were not records related. But what we did is we took these out of these old boxes, put them in archival boxes, and we did a catalog and a finding aid for them. And so you may have records that look like this, but that's okay. You can start now by cleaning, by organizing, and then get those archival boxes and archival document sleeves to take care of your records. Dust and other grime, dirt may be on your records. And so we're going to use cleaning things that I just told you about that were in your toolbox to get these records cleaned. We need to use a gentle hand when we're cleaning records because we don't want to tear our documents. We don't want to do damage to our documents. And so especially if they're original records, one-of-a-kind records that are important to our genealogy research. So we want to use the right tools, and that's why I told you about the Archivist toolbox. I would highly encourage you to get those things, put them in your toolbox so that when you need to clean a document or you need to repair a document, you have the right tools at the ready. It's soft bristle brushes. We talked about that when I was talking about the toolkit. Again, these will help you to brush off dust and dirt from documents. They're invaluable. And like I said, you can get them really cheap. Just go get you some of those big makeup brushes. They work perfectly. That's what we buy for the archives. We don't buy any special kind of brushes. We go down to that store that's everything's $1 and we buy makeup brushes because they work perfectly. And here are these sponges again. I have a funny story about these sponges. I am one of those that I'm kind of a penny pincher. And so I try to find things for really good prices. And I thought to myself, these are not necessarily really expensive, but I thought, I wonder if I can get them at a better price somewhere. And I reached out to a company that does work for like insurance companies when their clients have a house fire or they have some flooding or things like that, and they go in and they do a lot of cleaning work. And asked him about these sponges, and he told me that these sponges are made by one company and that the recipe for these sponges is protected, just like the Coca-Cola recipe. Like they don't let that out either. So I found that very interesting. But these cleaning sponges, again, are used just as they are. You don't need any water. You don't need any cleaning chemicals. But I'm going to show you here in just a second how to clean them. So you're going to take your document. You're going to put your document on a flat surface, a hard flat surface. You're going to put your hand in the middle of that document. Now you're probably wondering, how am I going to clean the document if my hand's in the middle of it? One thing you need to keep in mind is you don't need to put your document down, take that sponge and just swipe across it because you're going to tear it. So we put our hand in the middle of the document to steady the document. And then you take your cleaning sponge and you start in the middle and then you slowly wipe that sponge across the document going outwards to the edge of the document. And you do it in small areas. You don't do the whole document at once. Small areas, very slowly, and you clean it from the outside in. Work in small areas at a time. Again, if you're going to just swipe that across your document, you're going to tear it. I've seen it done. I've actually done it myself. So you don't want to do that. Keep your hand in the middle of the document and just work in small areas with the sponge across the document. Now, do not use these sponges on pencil writing. I can tell you that it will erase the pencil on a document. And I learned this very early on when I was going to school to be an archivist. They did something really funny to us in school. They gave us all documents that had pencil writing on them. They were not original documents, but we didn't know that. They gave us the sponges and asked us to clean these documents. Well, as we started cleaning, the pencil was disappearing because it was being erased. And all of us were just flabbergasted. We thought we were ruining these original documents. Well, then they told us that they were not original documents, but they were doing this exercise to get it really into our heads that you do not use these sponges on pencil writing because it will erase pencil writing. So do not use them. Removing hazards from documents. Now, what exactly is a hazard in our documents? Hazards are things that are attached to our documents that can really damage them, and we just don't want them there. We remove all metal from our documents in the archives, and you should do the same. Metal can be extremely damaging to documents. This is actually a box of some of the hazards that we have collected. I would say it took us 2 months maybe to collect all of this out of the records that we were working on. That's a lot, isn't it, in that box? And so we want to remove all metal. That includes staples, paper clips, anything that's made of metal you want to remove from your documents. You also want to remove rubber bands. Rubber bands, ask any archivist about rubber bands and they will tell you how much they dislike rubber bands. Rubber bands can be extremely damaging to documents. I have seen rubber bands literally glue themselves to documents and be extremely damaging. So we don't want rubber bands on our documents. And tape. Remember I told you there was no such thing as archival tape. Well, the cellophane tape and all kinds of other tapes that are used on documents, if they've gotten a tear and someone used tape to try to mend it, they're extremely damaging to our documents. And so you don't want to use tape if you have a tear in your document. You can use some of the archival tape, but don't use regular cellophane tape or any of those other tapes that are out there that are not used by archivists. Here's an example of what tape can do to a document. This is a receipt that we have in our archives, and luckily you can still see the writing, but tape will turn your document a very orangish yellow color and leave a residue. And the archival, those cleaning sponges will not get rid of this, and so it's there forever. And this is kind of what tape will do to a document. So when you're removing all metal, you want to remove staples, paper clips, straight pins. You'll be surprised if you haven't already found it, what our ancestors used to clip pieces of paper together. You want to remove grommets, hairpins, any kind of binding clips that may be on there, and just any and all metal fasteners, you need to remove them. Now, there's a photograph there to the right. This is some examples, some things that were found in the archives where I work. We took a photograph of it. As you can see, all different kinds of things, fasteners, paper clips, hairpins, things like that, that we just took out of our documents. And we try not to leave anything metal on our documents. These are also things you don't want to put on your documents because these are more modern. These are clips and things that we sometimes will put on there today. We really don't want to use these because not only can they bind our documents and cause damage that way, but the metal could also become, if they become next to moisture, then they can rust. Even stainless steel, I have actually seen things that were called stainless steel. Enough moisture, they will start to rust. Here is an example of what can happen to your documents. This is where you can see where metal paper clips were attached to this document. Now, not only did it rust, it came in contact with moisture, started to rust. And it doesn't take much moisture, just a little bit of humidity, and it will do this. But what rust does is rust actually eats the paper. And as you can see, there is actually missing pieces and parts of this piece of paper in this document. Luckily, we can still see the writing, but what if this was over something, some very important writing on one of your original documents? You just don't want this to happen. So the best thing to do is just to remove all of that metal so it doesn't have a chance to rust. And remember that micro spatula I told you to get for your toolkit? Well, here's how one of the ways we use it in the archives world. We remove staples with the micro spatula. And so as you can see, there's a very rusty staple on this document. And what we do is we take the micro spatula, we lift the two legs of the staple from the back, then we turn it back around, put that micro spatula underneath the head of that staple and just lift it right out. This is what we do on a daily basis. And yes, we take out a lot of staples, but we do it in such a way that the documents don't get damaged. We do not want to use these. The claw staple remover can actually cause more damage using it. And then I've seen this one. This is actually one that I did not know about until I became an archivist. This is a wand staple remover. And if you've ever used one of these, it's very destructive. You put that metal part underneath that staple head and you just yank it out. And so just think about what kind of damage that could do. And so go and use this micro spatula. Get you one. Like I said, they're very inexpensive. And if you come across staples, you can safely get them out. So we want to remove things that bind. Again, we always need to be cognizant of our documents and how they have fibers in them. And if you break down those fibers or break those fibers, then your documents are going to fall apart. So we want to remove things like rubber bands, twine, rope, shoestrings. I've seen shoestrings being used, hair ribbons, and yes, even band-aids. Maybe you have a stack of love letters for one of your ancestors and it's tied with a hair ribbon. Well, you want to take that hair ribbon off, but you want to preserve that hair ribbon. That's part of the record, part of the nostalgia of those records and those letters. And I put band-aids because in an archive setting, I have come across band-aids that were used to keep two pieces of paper together. I just think they didn't have anything else. They saw the band-aid and they used it, but I've seen it a couple, 2 or 3 times. So these are things that bind. They can be wrapped around documents, wrapped around a stack of documents, a stack of old letters. And again, they are breaking down the fibers in those documents and they just need to be taken off. These items that bind documents together, they can truly damage those documents. The longer they're kept that way, especially if they're bound very tightly, you want to remove it. Rubber bands are one of the worst things I think was ever invented as far as an archivist is concerned. Rubber bands can deteriorate to the point that they become very gummy. The whole chemical compounds in rubber bands break down to the point they become really sticky and gummy and actually like glue and can stick to your documents. And it's not pretty when you find something like that. It really, really isn't. Here is an example of that. This is where a rubber band has become so attached to these documents that we literally had to use the micro spatula and chip away at the rubber band residue to get it off of the documents. And then still you're left with this discoloration on your document, which you don't want. So rubber bands are something you just do not want. And if you've got documents, if you're one of those that have lots of letters stored in a box with rubber bands around them, take those rubber bands off because you don't want them to get like this. Again, twine, rope, shoestrings can also damage. Anything that's wrapped around and binding something can be damaged and they need to be. I talked about the hair ribbons. If you run across some hair ribbons that are around some of those love letters from your ancestors, don't throw the hair ribbon out. Just archive it right along with the letters because there's some sentimental value there. There is some value that you may even find where in the letters it's mentioned that she sent a hair ribbon to her beau. And so you want to keep the hair ribbon with those documents. Removing tape. This can be quite difficult. And so if you don't feel comfortable doing it, if it's on a very important document, I would encourage you to reach out to a conservator, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But if you can remove it, if you feel comfortable doing that, then do so. This is actually a newspaper clipping that I'm showing you, and you can see that that tape is really stuck on there. Tape is kind of like rubber bands. They will either become so brittle that when you touch them, it just falls off, or they have deteriorated in such a way that they become like glue and they are stuck there and sometimes forever. In this case, the tape has actually melted or has deteriorated to where this tape is actually pretty much part of this newspaper clipping. There is really not much of a way you're going to remove it. And so we have just left it alone, put the newspaper clipping in a sleeve, an archival sleeve, and have archived it just like it is. If tape becomes hard and brittle, it may come right off, which that's the perfect scenario. That's what you want. But a lot of tape will deteriorate and become very sticky and will glue itself to the document. And that's not what you want. You want to reach out to a conservator, a paper conservator, about helping you to remove it. Now, if you have documents, two pieces of paper, and someone has taken a piece of tape and used it like a staple to keep those two documents together, all you need to do is take a pair of scissors, clip the middle of the tape, and then the two documents are separated. And then you can use something else, which I'll show you in a minute, to keep those documents together. So, what is safe to use? I've told you what not to use, or if you find it in your records, to take it off. But what is safe to use? Plastic paper clips. There are times when you need to keep a couple of pieces of paper together, or 5 sheets of paper together, or some documents that need to make sure that they stay together. And so I would encourage you to use plastic paper clips or plastic coated paper clips. Now, ideally, I would say don't use any kind of clips or paper clips because they still are binding the paper and breaking down those fibers. But if I understand, I have things as well that I'm afraid they're going to get separated from each other and they need to stay together. So just get you some plastic paper clips. They're very inexpensive. Maybe even put some in your toolkit so that you have them when you need them. Archival tape. Remember, I said there's no such thing as archival tape. Well, this is a type of archival tape that archivists use, but we use it extremely sparingly. If you have a small rip or a small tear in a document and you're afraid that it will get bigger if you don't do something, you can use archival tape. Use it sparingly, very sparingly. Be sure to use the tape and put it on the back of a document or wherever there is no writing. Now, if your document has writing on both sides, you don't have a choice. But a lot of documents only have writing on the one side, and so I would attach the tape to mend that rip or tear on the back side where there is no writing. For severely damaged documents, if you have a document that's literally in pieces, I would not use the archival tape. I would contact a conservator and reach out to them, ask them for advice on how to archive something like that. Here's an example of what that archival tape looks like on a document. Now, as you can see, you can still read through the archival tape. It doesn't cover things up where you can't read it. And the archival tape you can remove for a certain period of time once you've attached it to a document. But like any other tape, after so long, it's going to be permanently there. So that's why I tell genealogists to put this tape on the reverse side of a document where there's no writing, where you can still mend the tear, but you're not covering up any kind of writing. This is what can happen when you have a document that you have folded and unfolded so many times that those creases have failed. This is actually a deed that we found when I lifted it up out of the box. It literally fell to the floor in pieces just like this because it had been folded and unfolded so many times. So I decided to do an experiment. I took the archival tape and I put it together. I took this document, this deed, and I put it all together with archival tape. Again, I don't encourage people to do this with an entire document, only for small rips and tears, but I wanted to see how well it would work if I did it with this document. I used the document repair tape like this from Lineco. There's a couple of different kinds, but you'll see it's called document repair tape. And this is what it looked like when I got finished. Now, there's a couple of missing pieces, as you can see. There's some holes there because these little bits and pieces had torn off or fallen off. But I think it worked pretty well. And so it is possible to do this, but I don't encourage it. This was just an experiment that I wanted to see how well this tape would work. And it actually turned out pretty well. Record storage. Now, I've talked about organizing your records. I've talked about cleaning your records, mending your records. Let's talk about storing your records. Again, we don't all live in an archives, and so we've got to look at how we can store our records. First and foremost, please do not store your records in an attic, basement, or a garage. They're not temperature controlled. They're not humidity controlled. Varmints and rodents and bugs and things can get to them and eat at your documents. Now, some of us, maybe that's all you have as an attic, or that's all you have as a basement or a garage. Well, if that's all you have, then be sure that the materials that you're putting your records in, the boxes that you're using, all of that is archival quality, because that will help. You want to store your records in a dry environment off the floor. A dry environment, that means where it's not a lot of humidity, and off the floor. This is something that I have had to learn over time. When you are working in your space and you are done for the day or done for that hour you were working, if you have boxes of records or piles of records on the floor, I would encourage you to pick them up and put them on a desk or on a bed or on a kitchen table or something, because you never know when you're going to have a catastrophe. If your house will flood, if something will happen that will get to those records laying on the floor. I learned this lesson quite by accident. When we were working in the archives, we went home for the weekend and we had some major rains that came in, and it flooded the basement of our courthouse where the archives is located. Um, Thankfully, I had no records on the floor, no boxes of records on the floor. I had just received a shipment of some new archival boxes that were empty. A few of those were on the floor. They did get wet, but there was no records in them. That taught me a very important lesson, to not leave things on the floor. You want to store your records in a place where the temperatures are consistent and do not fluctuate. Now, we all can't live in an archive. You know, when you go to an archive, a library where there are records, it's cold in there. You have to take your sweater to put on your sweater because it's cold. Well, the reason being is because they keep their temperatures low, because records are deteriorating by themselves. But if you keep the temperatures low, it slows the rate of that deterioration. And so that's why it's cold in there, and that's why you have to wear a sweater. Most importantly, keep your records out of direct sunlight. Sunlight is actually one of the most damaging elements to our documents and photographs. If you have documents and photographs framed and on walls or sitting on tables and the direct sunlight is hitting them, I guarantee you over time, the writing on those documents is going to wash away, and the image on that photograph is either going to deteriorate or wash away completely. I have seen it done. So we want to keep our records, photographs, even our artifacts such as a quilt laying on a bed. The sunlight can do a lot of damage. So we need to pay attention to how we have things displayed. Climate controls. Again, you know, you're not going to be able to be perfect with this, because who can live in a house that's 40, 50 degrees? But we need to keep our temperatures at the same temperature and keep it at a steady temperature. The fluctuation is what really damages our records. And so in the archives world, we keep ours between 35 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure what that is Celsius. So we keep it very cold. In fact, colder the better for us. But in your home, you'll want to find a temperature that you can live with, that's comfortable for you, and try to keep it at that temperature. And better yet, find a very cool place to store your records. Humidity levels, they are more important actually than temperature levels. Humidity will destroy your records. And so in the archives world, we keep our levels between 30 and 50%. I keep my dehumidifiers in our archives at 35%. So if you need a dehumidifier in the area where you're storing your records, then by all means get one. We have them in every room of our archives. We have a dehumidifier, but choose a level between 30 and 50% and keep it there consistently. That will keep the humidity out of the air and humidity away from your records. So the consistent temperature and humidity levels will slow the document deterioration, which means your documents will last a lot longer for your descendants. Again, consider purchasing a temperature and humidifier monitor for wherever you store your records. We have these in the archives. They are checked daily. In the archives world, we have to check them daily. We have to track the numbers to make sure we're being consistent. And so, but if you have a monitor, they're very inexpensive. Then when you see something that doesn't look quite right, then you can check into if it's warming up, if there's humidity in where you're storing your records, and you can address that. Because you do not want to see this. This is mold growing in a damp area in a home. Now, this is a pretty extreme example of it, but if you have documents in boxes, even if they're in archival boxes, stored near where this mold is, I can guarantee you there's probably mold on your documents. And mold is very destructive. And so we want to keep our humidity levels down, temperatures consistent, so that we don't start growing mold in our storage areas. Last but not least, we're going to talk about consulting with the conservator. Now, like I said, even archivists do this. When we have come up against something that we are not trained to handle, or we don't even feel comfortable handling, we reach out to a conservator. Just this last week at the archives where I work, we got a photograph donated to us that had mold on it, and it had a yellow residue on it that we believe was either cigarette smoke, because this picture hung in a home, or it is old varnish that had been put on the photograph. So I reached out to my conservator at the Tennessee State Library and Archives to consult with her about how to clean that photograph. So when you don't feel comfortable repairing your own documents, cleaning your own documents or photographs or artifacts, reach out to a conservator. If they have extensive damage, again, reach out to a conservator. They will either consult with you about how to clean it or take care of it yourself, or they may tell you, just leave it alone. Let's just put it in a box. Let's put it in a sleeve. Let's leave it just like it is because we don't want to cause any more damage. Especially if you have documents, photographs, or artifacts that are rare. If they're extremely historical to your community, to your nation, if you have one of a kind things, then yes, most definitely reach out to a conservator, because those things we do want to conserve. We want to make sure that they are not continuing to be damaged or deteriorate, because we want to save them, because if they're that important, that rare and historical, we want to save them. Locating a conservator. Where do I find one? Well, if you live in the United States, all state archives have a conservator on staff. Now, the majority of these conservators that work at the state archives make it a rule not to really help private citizens, but they could give you some advice. Emily Farik is actually the conservator that I talked to last week. She's the one who gave me the advice on the photograph. But I would reach out to them, because they can also give you names of companies or individuals who are conservators and their contact information, and you can reach out to them. Another place you can go is the American Institute for Conservation of Historic and Artistic Works. Again, this is a United States-based group. They have names and contact information on their website of conservators in the United States. Whatever country you live in, I would suggest that you try to search for conservators in that country, or in the area where you live in that country, because you need to have one that you can call on, email, phone call, to get advice on some things that you might be dealing with. So my parting advice to you is to not do anything to your records that you can't undo. That's very important to remember, because once you do something to it and you can't undo it, it's damaged for life. So keep that in mind. Thank you very much for attending this presentation. You can visit my blog at Genealogists in the Archives, and also look on Facebook. You can find me, just search for The Archive Lady. And after this presentation, if you have any other questions, please email me. I'd love to get email from those that have attended my presentations. If you've got any questions on any kinds of records preservation, I'll do my best to help. And if not, I'll try to find the answer for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Esther, see if we've got any questions.
We do. Here, let me hide your presentation. So informative and so useful. I see so many comments here. Elaine said, so many wonderful ideas, a great presentation. And we do have a number of questions, if that's okay, Melissa.
Yes, wonderful.
Okay, great. So we'll just start from the beginning. We'll get through a few of them. And
Okay.
of course, anyone whose question we're not able to get to, please feel free to reach out to Melissa afterwards.
Please do.
Okay, so we have a question here from Pat, and she said, it gets very hot in North Texas. How can we store our old records without heat damage occurring from the storage?
The best advice I can give you is to store your records in a dark place, such as a closet, under a bed. Now, when I say under a bed, make sure that you have it elevated off of the floor a little bit, because in case you have some kind of flooding issues, and you never know when that's going to happen. And it always happens when you're not home. But dark places like closets are a great place, because usually if it's dark, it's cooler. And so dark places, I always look for the darkest places in my home.
Okay, Cindy asks, how do you
You're
know if...
muted. There you go.
Oh, okay. I think there was just a delay.
You're good. You're good.
Okay, so Cindy asks, how do you know if you use something that says it is archival, but is it really? So do we trust it?
If it says archival, a lot of ways we don't have a way we have to trust, but you can buy pH pens. They're called pH pens, and you can use them on the material, and it'll tell you if it's actually got acid in it or not. That's what you're looking for. You don't want your materials to have acid. And so if you have something that says archival in the packaging, you can get these pH pens. They're very inexpensive. So if you really want to test it yourself, use that pen on the material, and it'll give you the instructions on the packaging of what color it should turn, if it has acid in it or not. So that's one way you can check it. Another way is to use well-known archival stores. Now, in the United States, we have several. We have our Gaylord Archival, we have Light Impressions, we have Hollinger Metal Edge. I know in other countries that there are archival stores, and so use a trusted archival store also helps.
Okay. Let's see. Judy asks, is acid-free and archival different from each other?
In some cases, yes. Just like I said, it depends on the company who manufactured it. Archival is actually more of a catchphrase. Acid-free, when you're looking at truth in advertising, acid-free, it should be the truth. It should not have any acid in the material. So I would lean towards more acid-free than I would archival.
Okay. I see Karen wrote, that's a good tip to lay the binders flat. And Connie said, this is very interesting. I'm switching from binders to folders now. And she said, I would just add a checklist in the front so I can mark what is in the file and dates on the item, and then I can easily see what's missing.
Absolutely. And you know what else I do too, and I didn't mention this because this is not an organizational thing per se, but I put a correspondence log in the front of all of my file folders. And what that does is I write down who I've contacted and for what. Such if I contacted a funeral home, I put the contact information, what I requested, and then I have a space over here where when I've heard them, the date that I heard from them, and what I received.
Oh, brilliant. Let's see, we have a question here from Doris, and she asks, how can I clear mildew from old documents?
Yes, mildew. First of all, you got to remember that mildew is a live thing. It is alive, believe it or not. So the first thing you want to do is exactly what I told you not to do. You want to take those documents or anything that has mold on it, take it outside, put it in direct sunlight for a half an hour. What that will do will kill the mold spores. That's the very first thing we have to do, is kill those mold spores. So don't leave it out there forever. Leave it out there for about a half an hour in direct sunlight. Then bring it in and use your brushes, and you can also use the cleaning sponge and clean off the mold. But you've got to kill it first because it is a live thing.
Okay. Barbara asks, can you use the dry sponges that are sold for taking marks off of walls?
No, those are different. I'm glad she asked that question. No, those are quite different. I would not use those on my documents and photographs. I would get the other sponges that I talked about.
Yeah, I think those are called the magic eraser or...
Yeah. No, they're good for cleaning the house and things, but not on our documents and photographs.
Okay, good to know. I see Victoria said, coming in late, is there a list available to share with these archival items on it? So first of all, Victoria, just to let you and everyone in the audience know, you can rewatch today's session afterwards. It will be available on the MyHeritage Facebook page under the videos section. So, if you missed anything or you want to sit down and kind of take notes and make that whole list, I saw someone else ask if there's a handout. So there isn't a handout for this current session, but you're welcome to go and rewatch today's session afterwards and take notes. And, it'll be available as well as all of our other Facebook Lives. So make sure to check that out. Okay, we'll take one last question here from Amy before we give our prize away today. So Amy wrote, many years ago, I laminated a page from an over 190-year-old newspaper in order to preserve it so that I could still handle and peruse it without damaging it. Did I do a horrible thing?
Well, Amy, you remember at the end of my presentation, I said, don't do anything you can't undo. Well, laminating is one of those things that you can actually undo, but it is a very long process and very arduous. No, laminating is one of those things we do not do. I can tell you years and years ago when laminating first came out, archivists across the globe thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. So we started laminating everything. I mean, even the United States laminated some of its most important documents. And then they found out that laminating is not so good. It actually will damage records. So since they found that out, they've been delaminating everything. So no, do not use the laminating process. You take those documents and you put them in a clear archival sleeve. They will be just fine in there. But if you have something that's laminated, I would suggest you leave it alone, because if you do contact a conservator and try to get them to delaminate it, it's a very arduous process and you're probably going to have to put out a lot of money to get it done. Best thing you can do is leave it alone. Digitize it. We haven't talked about digitizing because that's a whole nother presentation, but one of the best ways to preserve records is to digitize it. It doesn't save the actual record if something happens to it, but you've saved the essence of that record, and you can at least keep the digital copy if you've lost the other.
And I see that there was a request just to say your email address again, just in case for those that missed it. So do you mind just saying your email address for anyone who missed it?
Sure. It's my name, Melissa Barker, the number 20 at hotmail.com.
Okay, great. Fantastic. And of course, we hope to have Melissa back, of course, for future sessions. And hopefully for one of these sessions that you have all suggested in the comments section. We got some really great feedback about sessions and different things that you would like to learn about over 2022. So we hope to be able to bring you some of those sessions over the coming year. So now, Melissa, we get to give away a complete plan on MyHeritage.
Yay.
Yeah, a lot of fun. This is the best part. And so thank you, everyone, for all the comments and questions that you wrote in. And our winner today is Deborah Dworsky. And Deborah wrote to us and she said, I would love some sessions about how to best visually display our research results. So a fantastic idea. There's lots of charts and books available on MyHeritage, as well as, a lot of very creative ideas from our users of ways that they've displayed their family trees in the past. We actually had a blog post recently about a user who surprised his grandmother for her 100th birthday and printed out a MyHeritage sun chart. It's one of the most beautiful charts that we have on MyHeritage, a sun chart with the whole family, with photos of every single family member, and he printed it out on a nice piece of plastic, actually, and brought it to the family reunion to his grandmother's 100th birthday as a gift. What a special gift, and it really, touched her, and now it's hanging in her living room. So a beautiful story, and hopefully we can bring that session in the coming year as well. So congratulations, Deborah, and we'll be in touch with you through a private message to claim your prize. And thank you so much, Melissa. What a fantastic session, as always.
Thank you, Esther, and I'm looking forward to doing more of My Heritage in 2022.
Fantastic. Us as well. Have a great day, everyone, and have a fantastic start to the year. We hope that you are successful in your archival efforts, and let us know, please, how it goes. We'd love to hear. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.